Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. No matter where you are, when you are, just welcome to Canada's podcast, the Atlantic Canada version of entrepreneurship. And we talked to some amazing people in the Atlantic Canadian region and just hear some great stories and so on. And look, I'm rambling because I really don't even know where to start with explaining the amazingness of my guest today. Don Hache is really a pillar of the entrepreneur space in Atlantic Canada. He has been very instrumental in helping many organizations not only find their way to success, but then helping them, guide them, get them to those levels of high level success that they all strive to be. Scale ups are key to his focus. And of course, with most organizations in Atlantic Canada, anyway, I guess right across Canada, that's a fundamental challenge. It's easy to start, it's harder to scale. And so those are some of the conversations we're going to have with Don today. He's based out of Moncton, travels to Tampa, Florida for business also. A couple of years ago, Don, you were Futurepreneur Mentor of the Year, if I remember correctly. So not only a businessman, a business coach, an executive coach, but also a great participant in contributing to other entrepreneurs and helping them to find that success too. So Don, welcome to Canada's podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I love the energy you're giving to this podcast.
Thanks, yeah, well, we're great friends and we're great associates, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So I went back and I took a look at your LinkedIn profile. I'm gonna, you first of all, ladies and gentlemen, Don Hache, you got to check him out on LinkedIn. He's got just amazing background. And by the way, his initials. This is one thing is that business professionals frequently comment that Don Hache's initials DH stand for designated hitter. Now, tell me about that. What does that mean, designated hitter? Because a designated hitter doesn't play in the game all the time. But why would many business professionals reflect on that?
Yeah, it's a great thing. It's a funny joke. It goes a long way. Rivers, I'm a big, well, I'll get to that question quickly, but I'm a big fan of team-led business. And I'm not a very big fan of hero-led business, not a word, high-performing jerk. And I was one of those high-performing jerk in my first business. And I quickly learned that, in order to scale at any levels, you need to empower the team. That said, you also need a person who comes in and then sets a strategy, so somebody to execute upon. This is where the professionals in my business for the last 30 years have called me a designated hitter. When you need a strategy that somebody can execute on with confidence, this is where I come in. So, but now that said, like I said, I just said already I was a high-performing jerk in my first business. That is not to be confused with designated hitter.
Right. Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I think if you're going to have somebody on the line when it comes to a World Series, you want the designated hitter, not the high performing jerk. So I thought that was so cool that, that one, you've referenced that in your bio. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, a great lesson there in getting your bio noticed. Don't do what everybody else does, zag when everybody else zags. Don knows I like that phrase. And so I love that you did that. But basically, Don works intently with CEOs and business owners who are frustrated with the lack of accountability and communications within their leadership teams by aligning execution to strategy. So, Don, first of all, I'm going to presume you deal mainly with organizations that are $1 million plus in revenue. Is that fair to say? Okay, cool. And I want to set the alignment at, and entrepreneurs, whether you're startup or at that stage, remember you're going to get to that stage, and so you got to be prepared to get to that level. So, first of all, Don, how does an organization even get to that frustrated level that the CEO, it doesn't, there's a lack of accountability and communications within the leadership team, because obviously they had to start and grow. Where does it start to fall apart?
Great question. It's startups are a great pillar of our community. You need to be a startup in order to scale up. Where does it start? It really starts pre-scale up or pre-startup. Sorry, the entrepreneur, he or she has a great idea. It's got something going. They're going to start a company, and unfortunately, most startups will focus on getting 100% right up front before they can start scaling or selling their wares or services or product. The frustration comes into play because that person is, what I just said earlier, is a high-performing jerk in their company. They're the man, they're the woman, they're the queen bee, they're so on and so forth. And they have not put in place a proper communication plan or cascading it down to the next level of the company where they need to be. So that said, the entrepreneur, whether it be a startup or launch or a scale-up, has to be able to look around the corner and say, what's next to be needed in this process from this company to go to the next level? And usually lies with the entrepreneur itself. They have to look themselves in the mirror and say, hey, how do I communicate this? How do I get this information to the next level? Am I the right person in this seat to actually be the strategist, or am I more an executional mind? There's two different mindsets here happening. Strategy is terrible execution, and executions are terrible strategy. So this is where the communication is very important. That's why I say strategic execution, aligning execution to strategy is required. And that's a very big fundamental of communication of your strategy.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. So it kind of leads into my next question very nicely. What is a CEO? What is the role of the CEO in an organization? And I'm a startup guy. I'm not a scale up guy like you are. And I just see, but I think the reference point is still relevant to whether you're at any of those levels. But I see so many startup entrepreneurs. The guy or the girl says, "I'm the CEO," and they have no freaking idea what it means to be a CEO and to achieve what CEOs need to achieve. Can you talk a bit about the definition of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm biased on the answer I'm going to give you now. Whether it be a startup, launch, or scale up, again, I'm using that term. The CEO has the same responsibility. He or she has the same responsibility. There's three things. First, you have to be able to predict the future, and it's pretty darn hard to do these days. But yes, as I said earlier, what's around that corner? What's the future? Secondly, you have to be able to delegate with purpose. Delegate in the grand scheme of things is not an easy thing for a person to do, especially for a CEO. And third, they have to communicate the hell of what they're doing. Yeah, and that is it. So that's the definition of a CEO today.
So delegate with purpose. Can you describe that? Can you kind of expand on that a bit?
Yeah. So the delegation process with purpose is, first of all, you have to be the CEO. The CEO, he or she, has to be able to communicate their strategy, their vision, their dream. Call it that way. Right. And they have to let the team execute on that vision or dream. If you want to use that term again. The purpose is this team has to be purposely aligned to that vision. They have to be able to co-create that vision going forward.
And is that the disconnect that happens when we talked about initially at your bio? Is that really where the disconnect, where they get frustrated? Why can't they see what I want to do? Why can't they do what I see? Is that really where that happens? Yeah, exactly.
There's a huge disconnect there for many people, and so for some of them, they can't get over that disconnect. You just can't see it. So again, it's now the CEO. To answer your question more succinctly, the CEO has to be able to predict the future, where we're going. You have to be able to delegate with purpose. Delegate with purpose. They'll have that purpose and that core purpose, that core vision, fully baked in. If I can use that cheftorial word.
Yes, sir, you can.
Fully baked in there, and then therefore communicate the hell of that vision going forward. Let that team make this vision come true.
So when you say predict the future, dude, that's so much easier said than done. How does one predict the future as an effective CEO?
Right. So the CEO has to be a very people smart or visionary smart as well, where they have to be able to see what's happening out there. How to let high level say, well, what's happening here, what's happening there. Why is this happening? And find a way to differentiate themselves and their company going forward.
Right.
The predicting of the future for me, this is what I enjoy doing. I can't stand status quo, ADHD, whatever you want to call it. You need what's coming around the corner. What can we do something better is one thing, but how can we do something different and go after that 1% difference in the marketplace to differentiate ourselves, to be better at? So to predict the future is that, hey, you've got your vision, you've got 1 or 2 or 3 priorities for the next 12 months, you've delegated this with purpose to your team. Now you go, okay, what's next?
Right. So predicting the future starts with you understanding as to where you want to go as a CEO, and then putting those resources in place. Okay. So, the great Jim Collins, The Good to Great book. Is that a philosophy that you follow about getting the right people on the bus and then the right people on the right seat on the bus?
Absolutely. Jim Collins is a great saying is you start with who first, not what, not what, where, not how. It's who. And that's people. That's your culture. You start with who, then you go to the what, and then where and how. Absolutely.
Yeah. So how does, this is the other thing that you say the who. When I'm working with entrepreneurs, I remind them it's not about positions. It's about roles. Can you talk a bit about that? And say, the great Steve Jobs, the only reason he put a title in his cards is because, if you read his book, is because when he went to Asia, that was a representation of respect for position and people were looking for it. But he particularly did it in the lower case because he didn't want people to get tied into the title. He wanted them to just fulfill responsibilities. Can you talk about that from a leadership perspective as to, one, how do you design that? And two, then how do you ultimately, cultivate it so that people embrace their roles in a way that it gets the CEO in the vision they want?
Yeah, great. You brought that up. I like the way you framed it. So let me just take a step back. So roles and responsibilities is a great part of the frustration of CEOs. For some reason, the roles and responsibility, clarity of the scorecard of the individuals in the company is another frustration, which comes into lack of accountability in the discussion we opened up with.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the beauty of the CEO, in this case with Steve Jobs, yes, he did it basically based on a culture-based event, which is very smart, intelligent person. He goes to a different country, he looks at the culture, he predicts where he's going, and he adapts.
Right.
Absolutely. Right. Now, that said, what you just laid out for us and the folks listening in is that the CEO is one thing, owns the culture of the company.
Mm-hmm.
He or she protects the culture of the company. So the title is either here or there, as Steve Jobs pointed to us in his book and in his lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
However, the CEO has to inspire the rest of the company and the team and all stakeholders in that respect. So that's the culture-based, that foundation of the cultural base of the CEO.
I love it. I love that you mentioned inspiration. I think that's a very key word versus, I've heard the saying you don't incentivize, you motivate, you inspire. And so can you dig a little deeper in that? Because I think that's so important in our world. We think that the way you inspire is to give more money, but as you know, that's way down on the pecking order of what people want. So again, leadership, lean in. Talk about that inspiration piece, about some ways in which people can address or focus in on that.
Yeah, the inspiration is huge. Quality of a CEO, if he or she can have that as their the mantra, if you want to call it that way. The inspiration part of the business owners and CEOs, and whether you're a startup or scaling, is so important to your team. And it's like you just said, sometimes much more than money for them.
Yes.
The inspiration piece for any leader, whether you're a CEO or a leader within a leadership team, is a missing quality that people crave for these days. And have been craving for years. It's just we kind of forget what inspiration means. You can inspire people to do many, many things. Many, many things. However, how you use that inspiration is very important. You have to inspire that. You have to use inspiration to guide what we call, and back to Lencioni and Collins, the big heritage goal of your company to be.
Right on.
So
talk more about that.
Yeah, if you can inspire that leadership team, or forget the leadership team, your whole company to align with the BHAG, big heritage goal, everything you do every day, every decision you make every day has to be aligned with that goal. Otherwise, why are we doing it? Right? So that's a little bit of the inspiration that we're dipping into there. The BHAG is a huge part of inspiration if you can communicate it properly to the company.
And how does one go through identifying the BHAG?
Yeah, of course, there's many ways you can do it. There's many tools out there that can help you, but it's an exercise. You go through it yourself, and your leadership team know what is my big heritage goal 10 to 15 years from now. Now, many books will bring you to the original BHAG, which got a lot of business people going. Is JF Kennedy's A Man on the Moon in 10 years. That was a big, hairy, audacious goal back then. And lo and behold, in 9th year and some odd months, they put a person on the moon.
Right.
So BHAG has a lot to play in inspiring your company to greatness. And it has a lot to do with making sure that you can go from a startup to scale up in a proper way.
So tell us. I think that BHAG mode is bang on, and I mean, a lot of we don't really talk about leadership a lot in the journey of entrepreneurship. We do, but we don't. We focus more on cash management, customer acquisition, more of those harder skills than the soft skills that are important to really drive momentum forward. Tell us a bit about your organization. I can never explain it, because it would take me a long time to really share that value, because what it is, it's so deep. Can you explain to us what you're doing as an Atlantic Canadian entrepreneur? Because this is a podcast about Atlantic Canada entrepreneurs. So can you guide a little bit about your business and how you're leading it forward?
Yeah, so our organization itself, we're a coaching organization with multiple coaches deep. We are basically based a CEO plus leadership based coaching company. We don't just do CEO coaching. We don't do just leadership coaching. We found the missing link years ago is that you need CEO plus a leadership team in order to succeed to scaling to whatever that scaling means. So we emphasize that we work with team-led business or CEO plus leadership team businesses, and we apply tools that allows them to grow as a company, but as a leadership team, as a CEO, and as a company. And we break it down in basically 5 steps. But basically, we start off with a culture-rich company. We instill the culture. What is the culture of this company? And we evolve to the 5th step, where we want to take the CEO and convert him or her to a coach. A novel idea. Being a CEO as a coach, inspiring the rest of the company to go forward. So that's what we do in a nutshell. Now, what does that mean? Well, it starts with foundation. We start right at the foundation. What's our core values? What's our core purpose? All that stuff, that soft edge stuff that people are going, ooh, it's pretty soft stuff, but it's important. And then we evolve in the 5-step process or 7-step process, depending which process we use, and we just build that leadership team and the company where it's solid. So if you look at a company as a house or a structure, you start with a foundation. Then you put the walls up, then you put the roof up, and then put the process or the things inside the house. If your foundation is not solid, eventually your walls will fall down.
Right on.
That's why we always say that's foundation of culture is so important.
When I hear few entrepreneurs make it past that 8-year mark, that 5-year mark, and so on, I got to think, based on this conversation, that leadership or lack of is one of the key issues with failure or success as organizations move from that startup stage to that scale up stage or that maturity stage. Is that a fair comment?
It's definitely a fair comment, and whether you say 8 years or 5 years, if you look at Scott Tanis, he's now I think a Canadian politician, not politician, but I forget the term of it. But long story short, he used to run a company in Canada, very successful, sold it to an insurance company and exited and became a senator. There we go, senator.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And he has in the book, one of the books, he has a visual that talks about the valley of death of any type of companies, from a startup to an exit. And what's important there is that the crux of this visual is that to put a system in place. You need to put a system in place to go over those valley of death that occur. Now, in 2014, when this graphic was put out, there was less than 4% of companies that can make it over $1 million in revenue.
Wow.
Just think about that for a second. In $28 million, 28 million companies back then, less than 4% would make it over 1 million. And from 1 million to the next level is only 0.1% that can go over that $10 million mark.
Mm-hmm.
And in between this is what he called valley of death. Somebody will grow and then they'll fall in this valley without predicting what the future should be and what they need to put in place, the system.
Right.
So that said, this is what we're going to have to look at the whole part of that process. Sorry, my dog is barking here.
No, it's all good.
Start of the process.
This day and age, man, it's kids, it's dogs, it's sirens. Don't worry about it. It's good. It's good. Just so we personalize it a bit. What's your dog's name?
Precious. Yeah.
All right, Precious. Well, Precious shows up. We're cool. Precious is welcome, dude. Precious is welcome.
Thank you. So what I'm trying to get at is the graphics that Scott Tanis painted for us in 2014 in the book is that if you look at it quickly, first of all, it's onerous. You say, oh my God, if my revenue is only 1 million or less, I want to get, let's say 10 million. What do I do? Well, does it take a year or 3 or 5 or 8? Maybe. The message I'm trying to bring across here, Rivers, is you have to put a system in place that allows you to overlook those, project over those valley of death.
Right.
The biggest barrier to growth for any startups or any entrepreneur, forget the level you're, any entrepreneur, is right between the ears. It's knowledge, learnings, market dynamics, leadership scalability. All of that has come into play.
I love it.
And you have to think about that before you get to the next level. You do not want to think to how to scale my leadership team when you get to 10 million. You want to think about that when you get between 1 and 10 million. So you can overcome that valley.
Do you see a lot of CEOs that are startups that are not qualified to be CEOs of scale-ups?
Oh, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
There's a lot of CEOs like myself at the time, which are unemployable human beings. So you start a company.
Yes.
And you grow.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, this man we're talking to right now was almost into the RCMP. There's an interesting story around all that. So the fact that he's an entrepreneur is the exact opposite of structure.
Exactly.
So just a side note, sorry.
No, it's all right. It got me by surprise. You're right. I forgot about that.
Yes, sir.
I forget the question now. You got me off track. What was the question?
Yeah, the question was, CEOs, are they CEOs, the difference between startup CEO and a scale-up CEO?
Yeah, well, really, there is a difference, but yet there's no difference. When the pandemic hit in 2020, we had a webinar call, and I forget the webinar, but we had a part of the webinar. We said, what's the difference between a COVID-19 CEO and a startup CEO? None. Mm-hmm. You have to still grow the company. You have to look what you've got now and go from there. But you have to have a system in place. Now, an entrepreneur, and some of the companies we work with over years, Rivers, give me brief on this. You're first an entrepreneur, then you become a CEO. I don't know if you quite get what I'm saying here. Right? You're bullish enough, you're crazy enough to start a company, so therefore you're an entrepreneur. Put your blood, sweat, and equity into this, and you grow it, and eventually you grow as a human being, and then you go into a CEO role. The difference between an entrepreneur and a CEO. Entrepreneurs usually do not follow rules. A bit mavericks sometimes, in general, Then eventually grow the company where they have to put a system in place and they grow as an individual and become a CEO.
Yes,
Back to
sir.
what we said about CEO earlier, predict the future, delegate with purpose, and message and communicate the heck of your message. That's what a CEO kind of does today and more. But an
Yes.
entrepreneur doesn't do that.
No, they
What does an
don't.
entrepreneur do?
They just get the shit done.
Yeah.
That's what they do. And there's no rhyme or reason for it. It's they're trying to figure out how to play the game. I always use that analogy that business is all it is a game. And, I'd like to kind of take, but my idol is Tom Brady, as you well know. And, Tom Brady started off playing the game, but running around the field, didn't know what direction he was going in. He was just playing the game of football. And that's really is the entrepreneur, just trying to figure out the game, and they get better and better and better. But they also get better because they understand the rules and they understand the structure of the rule and they understand strategy of the rule so that they can really play at that professional level. But there's a lot of structure at the top of the top from the NFL.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
On that game, it just brings to mind a great game of business. Jack Stack has a company, is a CEO in the US of different companies, but he also he wrote a book called The Great Game of Business, amongst others. But
cool.
The Great Game of Business is a wonderful book. And he talks about all what you just said, the mini games, the structure. Everybody in the company has to understand what the company does. Did you have a good day? That goes back to your opening comment. The frustration of lacking communication and accountability.
Right.
That's all part of business.
Yes.
And most entrepreneurs, this is where they fall apart. You cannot communicate that to the next level.
Yeah. And it's so simple to say it, but interesting, so difficult to actually practice it. I know you're a big advocate of regular huddles with your team. And that's what what a great practice to put in place, but also what a great time to be able to reinforce what journey we are on. And thank you for that aha moment. As I'm building Cheftorial to the next level, I need to really start to talk about that more versus what we're going to do the next 3 days to help a client out. So I sometimes, even I've been at this for 25 years, and it's easy to forget to do it because you get playing in that entrepreneur space versus the CEO space. So yes. I think that's awesome that you brought that point up.
No, exactly. The all important meeting rhythms are the huddles, as you just mentioned. That's also it's the hardest thing to implement in any company.
Yeah.
It's messy at first. People will fight it. And for many reasons, because the fact that they don't want to be held accountable.
Right. Right. Don, what's the difference between a startup and a scale-up?
Well, a startup is basically an entrepreneur that has an idea for whatever reason, whether he or she's been kicked out of corporate, or I'm not trying to belittle the entrepreneurs here, but
they're most important people in society underneath the moms.
Exactly, they are the
first underneath the moms.
Yeah, they're the first responders of this world for business.
Yes, sir.
The entrepreneurs are. So the entrepreneurs basically has a great idea, have been stuck somewhere for whatever reason, and need to bring this to the next level. They want to get stuff done, as you just said. Right?
Yes.
And so the entrepreneur has that in mindset. They figured out a way to do something better. They listen to the marketplace and they found a niche and they go for it and they grade for it. Now, the difference between that and a scale up is that most entrepreneurs get stuck on making that product 100% viable versus good enough, as we call it, or 80%.
Mm-hmm.
And waste their time. So I'm trying to get that so polished and well done before they bring in the market. Now, I'm generalizing here, Rivers, but that's in a general sense, which still happens today.
Yes, sir.
The entrepreneur has that idea, he or she's gifted, and they take a chance on the world and bet it and go forward and get stuff done. Now, what they do after that is to scale up. They don't know what to do with it. Well, they do, but they just don't have the systems in place and stuff in order to take advantage of the scaling up process. And this is where sometimes an entrepreneur stumbles or falls apart or unfortunately fails, is not putting the processes in place to be able to scale. In order to scale a company today versus an entrepreneurial company is you have to first scale your people in order to scale your business.
Mm-hmm.
If If you want to 10x your business, you have to 10x your leadership team. That's an easy button, of course. Okay, entrepreneurs got stuff, got an idea, get stuff done. They're working at it, and now all of a sudden they're making revenue. But they forget one thing: what's around the corner? What do I need to do next to stay ahead of my competition? The scaling company has that process in place. The team gets together, they huddle together, they have systems and tools. They say, okay, great. This is what happened today and yesterday. What we learned from today and yesterday. How can we make it different for tomorrow and scale advantagely on that? But it comes down to systems.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah, I think it's a great way to describe it. And systems ultimately create the investment. If it's just simply the entrepreneur, then it's just a job. And one, you're going to burn yourself out. But two, no one's going to buy your business because it's not saleable. Not that they have to buy it, but it's not an investment. It really is just a job. So one thing we do terribly at from a Canadian ecosystem perspective is really focus on those organizations that, one, should be identified, but two, are also ready to scale up. We focus a lot on startups, but then we don't continue around first base and say, okay, now we're going to help you scale up. You, my friend, are part of a really cool initiative called 20,000 Scale-Ups. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, great. Thanks for asking. Yeah, absolutely. The first base thing's analogy came from a gentleman by the name of Francis McGuire. Okay. From originally from Major Drilling in Alcoa, but he said it, and he's in this public knowledge. That's why I'm sharing it. He said, "No, Atlantic Canadians are great at making startups and to get in the first base, but after that, they don't know what to do.
They don't know what to do.
No, and it's okay. It's okay to don't know what to do, but you have to know that you don't know what to do.
That you don't know. Yeah, hang on. Yeah, totally.
So, segue to this. Now, this is where the Scale Up initiative, the 20,000 Scale Up, a global initiative, starts up, basically. So under the Scaling Up companies, coaches, we have an initiative called 20,000 Scale Ups. For the next 5 or 10 years, our big heritage goal is to have 20,000 companies scale up around the world. So June this year, we're launching our first cohort in North America. Atlantic Canada, Andy Biting and myself are teaming together to do the 20,000 Scale Ups in Atlantic Canada, and it's going to be launching June 6, 7, and 8, I believe, in St. Andrews. Then I have another one in Tampa with Paul and I, Orlando, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and so on and so forth. So there's 22 cities this year that's been identified as scaling cities, handpicked, if you wish, by the Scaling Up community. So we're very fortunate and very excited to announce that Atlantic Canada has been chosen in one of those cities. So what we do is we put 5 companies in a cohort. This is a cohort-based learning, and there's a reason for that. Now, because most times and also it's CEO plus leadership team as well, because most times the CEOs go out to learnings, come back to the company, and they go, oh, I got to cascade this down to the company. And the company looked at them and said, okay, what flavor did it, boss? No, they just don't come back from stuff like that. So now this cohort is the CEO plus the leadership team that meet with 4 other companies, 5 total companies in the cohort, and we learn together on the system we put in place by scaling up.
Nice.
The beauty is you have peer pressure within the company, and you have peer pressure among the 5 companies in that cohort, and we learn together, and go from there. So thanks for asking. It's an initiative that we've been working on for the last couple of years. Finally launched it globally, and Atlantic Canada is amongst the chosen cities for this global initiative starting in June.
Well, no big surprise with your leadership, my friend. It's critically needed, first of all, and I also think Atlantic Canada is prime for this. So, last question in this conversation today: what are you seeing for entrepreneurship in Atlantic Canada? What's kind of your sense of this is what's going on that's good here in regards to the entrepreneurship ecosystem?
Man, Rivers, there's such an opportunity for Atlantic Canadian companies right now. Entrepreneurs, scaling, or startups is such an opportunity. The pandemic has given us a gift. people laugh when we say this, but the pandemic has given us a gift.
Yes, sir.
It's allow us to focus on our backyards for the first time in a long time.
You're right.
Right? Look at a community, start buying local, whatever you want to call it. But not only that, the gift that it gave us a chance to look at a different perspective. To bring global local is one thing. I always call bring global local. But also look at different perspectives. Say, how can we build an ecosystem stronger, stronger going out of this pandemic that we're in? That's the key. We want to be stronger and whole coming out of this pandemic. I know that word's been used and abused, the pandemic, but there's such an opportunity right now for Planet Canadian businesses to learn from what happened and leverage this. And hopefully the last 2 years, the gift that the governments have given us in form of services, call it this way for now, to help us train our people, help us put systems in place, help put stuff in place that we can come out of this stronger than we came in. And there is a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs, Planet Canada. I bring it to the analogy of anytime we go through a recession, hit the word recession now, but anytime we go through a recession, we want to be stronger on the way out to take advantages of the opportunities coming out. This is what's happening right now here at Planet Canada. Anybody
I've heard you say that. Yeah, I've heard you say that before many, many times about coming out of the recession, and it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity because I have really called the pandemic as the great equalizer, not the great reset, but the great equalizer, because everybody was saying, "What do I do now?" And so the small guys and girls can compete with the big girls and guys in such a way, because we're all just trying to figure it out. So I concur. Atlantic Canadian, there's a great ecosystem that's being further developed, but I think entrenched. I mean, we see migration happen hugely towards New Brunswick and Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, and I don't quite know how it's happening in Newfoundland, but it's an upward mode for lifestyle. Period, let alone just work style. So
and if I could add to your question,
yeah, dude, go for it.
Atlantic Canadians got to stop to be so darn humble. Ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. The definition of humble in Lencioni's book and stuff is that you have to be comfortable enough to be vulnerable enough to ask for help. Yeah, don't be that jerk that we talked about earlier. Ask for help.
Right. Yeah.
So
I think that's very important to be able to. And here's the other thing. Ask for help because people want to help. That's the other bonus thing about being in Atlantic Canada. I find that with the entrepreneur space anyways. Most people are pretty open to help, but in Atlantic Canada, they are in particular. Don, look, as always, it's great to hang out with you. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't know, but I keep bringing Don back into my conversations when I want to bring him to the value for audiences that I speak to. So thank you, friend, for continuing to bring just your kindness and your wisdom and your journeys. It's just fantastic. We're lucky enough to have you in Atlantic Canada. How do people hang out with you if they're leaning in and they say, okay, I want to hang out more with Don Hachey. I want to follow what he's doing. I want to learn from him, and I want to connect with him?
The best way is to follow me on LinkedIn, of course, or just go to the website, the celtrongroup.com.
Okay.
And my calendar is there. You can, it's pretty full, but you can find a spot. I'm open. I'm always gracious giving my time. But also, if I could put a plug on it, go to the events section. You'll see that 20,000 Scale Up initiative right on the website. Yeah. Look at it. It's by invitation only. There's only 5 spots per cities. Apply.
Yeah, great thing to do that. So can you just spell out your website address, because you said it kind of quick?
Yeah, and that's my French side of me. So the Celtron Group, the THE Celtron, SELLTRON group.com. So you go there. So the celtrongroup.com, you go there, you can just go to events. You can see the events happening, or just connect with me on my website, and my calendar is there. You can book time with me to have a coffee chat or stuff like that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've been doing business for 25 years, and I always keep coming back to Don for all kinds of reasons. And one of them is just that he responds and is very gracious for this time. And I know that my journey has been enriched by my friendship and my having you as a colleague also, Don. So thank you, my man, for hanging out on Canada's podcast, Atlantic Canada. We look forward to the next time to give in a chat. Until then, We'll look
Thank
forward to seeing this going live. Talk to you soon, Don.
Cheers.